And we're live. Welcome to Interchain FM, a podcast that covers all things blockchain interop and multi-chain. If you're seeking alpha in Cosmos and the rest of the cryptosphere, look no further. I'm your host, Django Unchained. So today we are here with Sam McPherson of MakerDAO. As you know, Maker is the godfather of stablecoins. Welcome to Interchain FM. Very excited to have you here. We're having a bit of a different sort of episode today because we're having an Ethereum native DApp. This is the first of its kind. We typically host just Cosmos native apps, but it's especially relevant that you're here to talk about DAI because DAI has just been bridged over through Axelar on Osmosis. And so that's why it's especially relevant as people are in the Cosmos space are looking for stable coins that sort of supplant the role that UST had in the IBC ecosystem. So welcome here, Sam.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us about your background?
Sure. So my name is Sam McPherson. I'm on the protocol engineering team for MakerDAO. Basically, we're focused on core protocol smart contract development. So I've been a part of MakerDAO for 2 years officially, but sort of part of the community for 4 years now. It's a great project. I love it.
Great. And so you're part of the core team, and there's a separate DAO as well, right? How do those kind of, how are they separate?
Sure. So the DAO is sort of the overarching structure. The primary sort of way we break ourselves up is into what's called core units. So I'm on the protocol engineering core unit, which is what I just basically described. But we have other core units such as devoted to like risk analysis, growth in BD, oracles, and there's like 22 in total and, continuing to grow. So that's sort of the main unit of the DAO. It's interesting. There is no legal entity attached to Maker anymore. There used to be the Maker Foundation, but it dissolved in December of last year. So we're purely as a DAO right now.
That's great. Decentralization. What led to the foundation's dissolution?
I mean, this was always the goal. Rune, the co-founder, has been saying sort of from the beginning that gradual decentralization is always the goal. So the foundation was put there as a sort of practical interim solution to kind of get the ball rolling. And it's interesting. A lot of other sort of protocols seem to emulate this pattern of like starting with a legal entity, bootstrap the ecosystem, and then gradually hand it off to the DAO.
Okay. And the DAO is the distributed organization that manages a treasury. Is that right? And then there's like a multi-sig holder cabal. I don't know how else to say it. There's a group of multi-sig holders, and they allocate funds to serve different initiatives.
So you can look at it like fundamentally a DAO is there to sort of manage resources, be it assets or employees or whatever. Basically, it is kind of like you can think of it almost like a company basically, but there is no traditional legal structure. It's also a little bit more flat. So that's another difference. How it runs, there is no multi-sig. We have a governance system. Maker holders vote on proposals that can be put forward by anybody. If they pass, then they get executed. So right now we have another sort of element here, what are called delegates. Maker is a growing and complex ecosystem, and not every sort of person holding one or two Maker is going to spend the time evaluating everything that's going on and voting sort of the best way. So we have these sort of intermediaries where people can say, I like this way this person operates, and then they can take their Maker and allocate it to them, and then they vote on their behalf.
Okay. That's sort of similar to how Cosmos governance works, where if you're delegated to a particular validator, you sort of inherit the vote of that validator. But at any point, you're able to override their vote if you disagree with what they voted on. And so it's sort of a representative democracy, but can fall back on a direct democracy if needed.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, yeah, very cool. So it sounds like the governance of MakerDAO just distributes funds directly. So is that what the protocol engineering core unit is funded by?
Yeah, so all the core units are funded by the protocol. So currently, the protocol makes more money. We're starting to break even now more, but we bring in more money historically than we have been spending. And that money goes to growth initiatives such as growing the teams and marketing campaigns and whatnot. So each of the core units proposes a budget for the next year. Protocol engineering formed actually almost exactly a year ago, May of 2021. And we had an initial budget and we had an expectation of hiring. And so we use the protocol funds to basically fund that. So we are sustainable, which is kind of unique in the industry.
Okay, so and what would be your runway given that the industry has taken a dive into
Yeah,
less value?
yeah. So as our revenues were far higher than our expenses last year, just due to the bull market and surging interest rates and whatnot. So what we did with all that excess revenue is we put it into our treasury to basically be prepared for when the market reverses. It always does eventually. So being prepared with lots and lots of stable coins such that you can sustain yourself through the worst of times is absolutely essential. So during the bull market, yeah, we basically just piled a bunch of cash into our treasury, and even with this big correction, our revenues are actually roughly in line with our expenses right now. So we are still actually not operating at a loss, which is pretty astounding in my opinion.
Okay, great. And when you said stable coins and then you said cash, do you mean US dollars or another type of fiat or another type of another stable coin? Like which one?
Yes, so no, we're using DAI. Yeah, I'm saying stable coins more generally, but yeah, our treasury is it is entirely DAI.
Got it. Okay, so with DAI, can you just give us a high level overview about how the protocol works and how it is different from Terra's algo stable? Because
Yeah,
you guys are backed. DAI is backed.
Yep, 100%. So yeah, that is the main difference between us and UST is that Maker has taken the approach that every single DAI in circulation has to be backed by at least $1 of collateral, such that we can minimize the bank run risk to a very negligible level. This is very important for people who want to hold the stablecoin. uh, Average users do not want to like basically be concerned with having this sort of bank run occur. And the only way to guarantee that is to over collateralize your stablecoin. This is the approach. MakerDAO has taken this approach from the very beginning, even with the white paper. I think that was 2015. It's always been this route.
Yeah, you guys have been on the more conservative side. And and would you be able to comment about how this differs from Frax, for example? And right, we could talk all day about the different models that stable coins are modeled after, and now we kind of know definitively that the algo stable model kind of has failed, unfortunately. So now it's left to being a centralized stable coin versus the over collateralized stable coin.
Yeah, more or less. I want to put one caveat: the algo stable. It's kind of used for under. It's like a synonym, kind of for like under collateralized stable coins. They're not entirely the same. There is over collateralized algo stables such as Rye. But yeah, anyways, with what you're talking about, Frax. Frax is actually a hybrid model, kind of between Terra and Maker. They are mostly collateralized. I think their backing right now is about 80% last I checked, but I haven't checked since the market went crazy. So maybe it's slightly different. Their idea is that you don't need to be 100% collateralized. It's slightly too inefficient. So they will allow some degree of algorithmicness or under collateralization because they feel that this is safe enough not to trigger a bank run. MakerDAO, as you said, takes sort of the most conservative approach in that we want to protect DAI holders first and foremost. They're the most important to us. We want the stablecoin to be absolutely rock solid. And the best way to do this is to over collateralize completely, because there's no risk of bank run, at least for a long enough period. I should add that caveat.
Okay, so with DAI holders being the highest priority, how does this how do you reconcile this with maker holders?
Yeah, so I mean, stablecoins are interesting. They're always a balancing act between people who want to take out loans, people who want to hold the stablecoin, as well as maker holders. We sort of take a fundamentals-driven approach. We want to build the best product possible and grow the ecosystem in sort of a like slow but methodical and safe way, such that the long-term outlook is we will be a significant player in the stablecoin market share in the future. The market right now is I still, in my view, very, very small compared to what it will be. I fully expect it to reach several trillions of dollars in the not too distant future. So sort of providing a product that everybody wants, I think is far more valuable than short-term speculative price on Maker.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen what happens when you put when you put a stable coin on steroids. It kind of has this spectacular growth in the short term, but then in the long term, it wasn't even in the long term, it blew up. So, yeah, what's really exciting that I want to touch a little bit on is that we just opened up a bridge from Ethereum and Avalanche to Osmosis. So therein is our interop solution, and DAI has been bridged over ERC20 DAI as well as Axelar DAI. They're not fungible, but you guys have your de facto bridge is Wormhole. Is that right?
No, sorry, I want to make a clarification. Our bridge, we were previously calling it Maker Wormhole, unrelated to the more well-known Wormhole. We've since rebranded for obvious reasons. We're now calling it Maker Teleport, but it is completely unrelated to the other Wormhole.
I see. So you guys just had like a name collision, and that caused confusion.
Yes.
Okay, I see. Okay, well, that's good to know. Yeah. Anyway, so there seems to be more deeper intertwining of liquidity, especially with the Axelar bridge. What's been announced is that Axelar is going to be taking like something like 1% of its token supply and airdropping to people who bridge DAI over from with Axelar to Osmosis. And so that's sort of been the news, and that does segue us into your multi-chain strategy. I know you said that you guys don't have Cosmos native integration in your roadmap, but the liquidity is coming through anyway. What are your thoughts about that? Because people in the Cosmos ecosystem have been wondering, well, what's going to be the new stablecoin that sort of becomes the de facto like fee token of Cosmos? And right now, it's sort of up in the air. It looks like USDC is making bold moves to take the helm on that, because we are working with them to create a native app chain for them. So, but DAI is a big contender as well. What are your thoughts? Do you have any vision about the future?
Yeah, so this is awesome, and this is actually what I love a lot about DeFi is I believe all these efforts were sort of just community led. The DAO has not been too directly involved up to this point. So we do not need to give permission for people to go ahead and start sort of staking DAI on these other platforms like Cosmos and whatnot. It's truly great. And as for our roadmap, we have a few initial chains that we're targeting for the start, but the mentality is to basically expand to wherever the users are. So if that's Cosmos, we will make sure Maker is available there. We just don't have it on the roadmap yet, but yeah, that's definitely not saying we're never going to.
Mm-hmm. And so I have on my screen your roadmap, a visual roadmap of your multi-chain strategy. So right now you're still on Ethereum 1.
Yes.
But it looks like you guys are going to instantiate slave instances on its Ethereum layer 2s like Starknet, Optimism, Arbitrum, Polygon, as well as Avalanche. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so our initial rollout for this, as you said, is going to be Arbitrum, Optimism, and we have a bridge deployed on Starknet as well. We are actively working to get the next piece done, which is these Maker slave instances, which will be essentially the Maker protocol deployed on foreign chains. It's a lot more work than say these more isolated protocols, and so we've been this has like been the primary focus for the past year for us, and we're getting close. We should be see Maker on these L2s by Q3. So this picture is actually really nice. I think it captures the high level future of Maker. And there's kind of three main things here. There is the core Maker protocol being deployed on these various chains. That's kind of like getting the foothold in. Once we get there, we can then deploy two of our main products. One of them is called the D3M, which is basically DAI liquidity injection into other protocols. Maker, in my view, is looking more and more to become like a credit wholesaler as opposed to lending to the end user. I think a good example of this is say Aave. We have this active on mainnet, where I don't know if people know this, but the DAI market on Aave, actually part of the lender there is the Maker protocol itself to keep the interest rates down for the end users. You know, people know and love Aave. DAI is on Aave, so we want to enable the best experience possible for them. But this concept sort of generalizes to the different protocols you see here. We are about to deploy another D3M to give liquidity to Compound. Those are the sort of the DeFi markets, but we are now expanding into more hybrid and traditional lending markets. This would be something like you see Maple, where they're kind of like a hybrid. They sit between TradFi and DeFi. They have sort of on-chain tokenization of lending and whatnot, but then the funds get moved out into the real world, and they will eventually be given to things like more traditional lending institutions. They also loan out to DeFi market makers as well. So they kind of sit in this middle ground. We're also working with another protocol called TrueFi, very, very similar sort of high level concept. Yeah, this is part of Maker's push to kind of get exposure to the real world and kind of connect more regular people, I guess you could say, into DeFi, which I think is kind of the goal of everybody. So we're assisting with that. And the last piece here is what's called Maker Teleport. This is all these little DAI tokens jumping between the chains. We believe the multi-chain future, it's going to be very, very important for low friction transfers between chains without touching Ethereum mainnet, which is likely to continue to become more and more expensive. I personally view Ethereum as going to just turn into basically a settlement layer in the not too distant future, and regular users will not be using it. So it's absolutely essential that people are able to have some DAI on Arbitrum and then jump to Optimism and have all this magic occur in the back end. And it just makes this very, very easy and affordable for them to do this, as well as at high volume.
Yeah, looking at your multi-chain chart, this looks exactly like the Plasma white paper, by the way, which is there's a settlement layer, which was always meant to be Ethereum 1, but then there's the Plasma chains that are supposed to have liquidity exit onto Ethereum main chain should anything bad happen. But this is exactly what that architecture looks like. Maybe it doesn't have the exit game dynamics like the white paper said, but this architecture sort of speaks to that.
So we do have like the ability to exit and stuff like that. I mean, the nice thing about this is it's super. We're designing it to be super safe for DAI holders and end users, so that there's always sort of exit ramps and like stuff like that. And because we can pool all these funds together, we can kind of get economies of scale on Ethereum mainnet. But yeah, the Maker will still primarily live on Ethereum mainnet, but it will sort of transition to the settlement layer, whereas the users are using the protocols they love on all these L2s and L3s and sidechains, whatever they want, right?
And what's the latency for exiting? It's not 7 days, but I assume, right? What is it in your scheme?
Oh, specifically for the bridges, I mean, that depends on the chain, right? So for Arbitrum and Optimism, I think they both have 7-day withdrawal delays. But we also look at exiting as, say you want to exit the Optimism ecosystem and you want to go to Arbitrum. For the end user, you likely don't want to go to Ethereum because it's going to be prohibitively expensive. Right. So this is what something like Maker Teleport can give them, right? They can take all their funds into DAI, and then they can, for essentially minimal cost, move their funds using the teleport system and not have to worry about the underlying settlement layer stuff at all.
So would the user only exit out of Optimism, for example, because let's say Optimism gets corrupted and they're like, okay, well, I need to move everything over to Arbitrum. Is that what they would use that for?
Yeah, I mean, the corruption thing is a little bit specific, but let's kind of ignore that case and just more like, I just want to get out, right? You're not trapped in Optimism. Like I have some tokens or I have DAI or USDC or whatever. I basically just want to move all my funds over to Arbitrum, right? Like you don't want to do that.
They want to use some other DApp on Arbitrum, I guess. That
yeah, exactly. And then ultimately, you know, if they want to exit to USD, like they can like go through Coinbase or whatever. And I think they'll probably have on and off ramps if they don't have already connected to each of these chains. It's all about user choice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah, I do want to go back to the Maple application because that part's really interesting. I know that where we are in the crypto space now, we're inching ever closer to the reality of collateralizing with your crypto, and then being which will enable you to take loans out on mortgages, for example. So we're inching ever closer to the real world with this magic internet money. So yeah, well, why don't you talk about that? How close are we to this sort of vision? And do you think DAI has a place in that world where we're going to be able to collateralize using DAI and then just buy a home?
Yeah, I think we're getting very close to it. Actually, that specific use case you just mentioned could be done already, right? You can take your ETH, you can stick it in a Maker Vault, take a loan and DAI, and then, you know, exit to US dollars and buy a house. So that totally can be done at this stage.
Yeah, but I mean without exiting into fiat.
Oh yeah. Yes, sir. If people are you know, offering mortgages in DeFi, that would be great. I'm not aware of all the efforts going on with that, but I'm sure it's being done. And in general, I think tokenization of real assets is sort of the big thing here. So yeah, Maple specifically, they're a protocol that's kind of working towards this. This sort of on-chain tokenization of real-world collateral is like the holy grail. Like we want this. So many protocols want this. I think it would give so much legitimacy to DeFi, and it's what so many different folks are working on. With Maple in particular, their setup is basically they have these pool delegates that have a pool of funds that you can sort of collect from either USDC or DAI, and then this switches over to the real world, and they would issue these loans off chain, and then they have sort of legal enforcement sort of on the edges there to make sure everything's all good. Yeah, my personal view is that this is what's going to drive the next bull run, in my opinion. Is
oh yeah,
this token getting the real world assets on chain is going to be huge. You know, as much as we've grown in the past 2 years from the bull market, the size of the market is still minuscule
Yeah.
compared to the traditional markets, right? Like the
Oh
bond
yeah, compared to
market.
Forex.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like we're peanuts. So I expect there to be like a sort of similar several order of magnitude
Yeah.
increase in the not too distant future when somebody sort of cracks this nutshell. And it's like I think we're at this point where it's like it hasn't been done, but when it gets done and it's scalable, it's just going to open up the floodgates.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so this further this further entrenches the idea of how important stablecoins are as a DeFi primitive, because what I can see happening is, people will be taking DAI, USDC, or whatever other stablecoin, using that as collateral and taking out real world loans so that they could get real world assets. And then, as soon as those real world assets become continuous, I like to take what Sunny Agrawal says about taking discrete real world assets and making them continuous, meaning, if I'm collateralizing and borrowing against my DAI, to take a mortgage out on a house, then what can happen is, if I could then tokenize that house, put it in some sort of like vault, like a or a prime mortgage vault, let's say, and turns that into a continuous asset, and then allow people to speculate on that. That would then allow me to, take out more assets by using that as collateral, and so you could sort of have this daisy chain of leverage, out of this entire system. But as long as the underlying stable coin is solid and not going to collapse, then we're going to have basically, like a Wall Street 2.0. I think we'll be more robust than the Wall Street that came out of the 2008 financial crisis, except all on just DeFi, and we don't have to fall back on any of the centralized gatekeepers that we used to have before.
Yeah, I like that sort of like I'm picturing the exact same future. And you know, if we have it all sort of on chain and auditable and stuff like that, we won't have repeats of like the housing crisis, because you can,
Mhm.
you know, if you want to dig into these like prime mortgage type stuff, the pooled mortgages, you can just fully audit it yourself, and like all on chain. And so we the transparency is what's key, in my opinion, that
Mhm.
differentiates us. So yeah, and you know, when that becomes available, Maker will gladly onboard that as collateral.
Extremely exciting.
Hmm.
So I want to touch on the NFT platform on Avalanche. Why is that the application that you've highlighted in your multi-chain strategy?
There's just an example I threw out. There's no
Oh,
particular significance to it, but it's sort of highlighting the general D3M strategy. So you know, generic NFT platform, generic real world asset lender on the Polygon example. These are just, you know, ways we can inject DAI liquidity such that users can have the best experiences on the protocols that they love.
mhm. Yeah, and again, if there's again, DAI used as collateral to take out loans, for like blue chip NFTs, for example, and then you could take out, and then you could collateralize with your share of that NFT, and then take out more leverage. Again, that does fall back on that particular
Yeah,
use case that we touched on.
yeah, I will say the NFT thing is something we're looking at. It's very interesting. It's still kind of being worked out from what I'm seeing. I'm not too into this space, so I don't know. I kind of just see what's going on. But other people are really into this, and we have folks at Maker sort of actively investigating using NFTs in some form as a collateral at Maker. I think that could be definitely very useful. Yeah, long term.
Yeah, again, the same concept applies, which is taking discrete assets and turning them continuous, which is, if you could somehow turn non-fungible tokens fungible by putting them into like an ETF of sorts, or an index of sorts, then you're able to to turn those continuous, so to speak, and then like collateralize them as a sort of like basket of assets.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's at least been the conversation that I've been having with other people, like really trailblazing in the NFT space. Um, and the tooling that they would provide like on chain to make this happen would be some sort of like on chain escrow protocol, I would
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, makers. As soon as some other talented individuals make this a reality, makers happy to onboard the continuous fungible token that comes out of this.
Very exciting. Okay, so that being said, so in the osmosis thesis about um, multi-chain is that you risk diluting your protocol owned liquidity. So that's why there's just such a move in osmosis to like not spread out its liquidity to any other chains. It wants to be sort of source chain that hodls all of its liquidity as well as aggregates most of the liquidity from other chains. Um, but Maker, you guys want to be a net exporter of your liquidity to other chains. Why do you think that is an optimal strategy?
Yeah, I think it comes down to what is Maker's biggest advantage, in my view, is that we have near zero cost of capital. So if things are safe, if the protocols are safe, we are able to inject DAI liquidity without requiring LPs on the other side. This is the constraint that everybody else has to deal with, and Osmosis is probably making the correct call where they want to keep it all together, right? Because forming large amounts of liquidity is not easy, and that's a large portion of the effort of 2021 and 2020 was this yield farming thing to bootstrap liquidity. It is very, very expensive to bootstrap liquidity, and this is just Maker's biggest advantage because we can just provide, within reason, our own liquidity if we have Maker deployed natively on these chains.
Yeah, the other difference is that Maker is a DApp, right? You're a smart contract that's running on another chain who uses security in a different way. Whereas within the Cosmos space, the same liquidity token is also the staking token that lends security to the underlying network, and so it's sort of different in that way. And so do you think that you're going to aggregate a lot more liquidity by being on these different chains, like by adding up all the liquidity in the different slave instances that you're going to have?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, bootstrapping liquidity is really hard. The primary mechanism to do it right now is yield farming. So once we get Maker deployed on all these chains, the aggregate liquidity of Maker should improve just by the fact that people can rely on there being a large amount of liquidity. It's kind of like a catch-22 to a certain degree, right? Like people don't want to provide liquidity for tokens that don't have much liquidity on these chains. And so by bootstrapping it with the protocol as opposed to say yield farming, we can kind of get a more sustainable liquidity pool, and then that just builds trust that people can exit into DAI or out of DAI, and that just sort of creates larger pooling of liquidity. So it's just sort of a positive, virtuous cycle.
Hmm. So yeah, I want to get your take, and this is a philosophical question. Like, what would your view be about the dichotomy between multi-chain versus cross-chain? Which is, I'm sure you read Vitalik's blog post about what he thinks, but
Multi-chain versus cross. Can you clarify that a bit?
yeah. So Vitalik's blog post was about. So his thesis is that multi-chain is ultimately going to win over, and obviously, multi-chain is what Maker is doing, which is we're going to have a source master instance on Ethereum and instantiate different slave instances on different L2s around Ethereum and ultimately relegate Ethereum L1 into a settlement layer. So to Vitalik, that's the winning paradigm. But in Cosmos, we're saying, well, there's this whole cross-chain thing, and the difficulty with multi-chain is that you need to build individual bridges between all of these layers. You need to build a bridge between Ethereum and Optimism, and there has to be a bridge between Optimism and Arbitrum, for example. Whereas in the cross-chain world, you don't have to do that, right? You just run relayers across different chains. They speak the same communication protocol via IBC. And ultimately, this cross-chain or interchain paradigm will subsume the multi-chain paradigm. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think they can both coexist. Maker originated on Ethereum, so we're kind of naturally in the multi-chain portion of that. But I mean, different protocols require different things. So I'm not entirely clear that having sort of an anchor base chain for every single protocol makes sense. There's been like recent talk about sort of like if people want to say deploy some token or some NFT or something, and Ethereum's too expensive, they want to start on some other chain, but then they want to kind of incorporate moving to Ethereum potentially later as it becomes more popular, more affordable and stuff like that. So I think there's room for all of this stuff, to be honest. I don't think there needs to be one winner and everything else loses.
Yeah, sure. Does the ETH2 merge have any effect on your roadmap? Like, how does that change Maker's plans?
I mean, it'll be nice. I think it'll probably have a pretty big price impact on ETH. And
you think so?
That's my personal speculation, but but yeah, it doesn't. The protocol itself, it doesn't really affect too much. We exist at the application layer and not at sort of the consensus and chain layer. So it should just be smooth transition on our end. What it might have an effect actually is that the types of the collateral that are coming in. So for example, we have liquid staking tokens such as Lido, ETH, and Rocket Pool, staked ETH, that are starting to become more and more popular. And as the merge happens, they will finally get redemption, which may give more confidence to moving into these assets, which should shift the ETH supply into staked ETH supply and the various liquid staking derivatives. The beauty of liquid staking is we can take it as collateral, and we already do. So we offer Lido staked ETH Vault. People can put up their Lido staked ETH and then take out a loan in DAI, same as you would ETH. So I expect the merge will probably accelerate that trend of shifting away from ETH and more into the liquid staking ETH.
Are there any worries on your end about the concentration, just like the sheer concentration of voting power that Lido and Rocket Pool has right now? Like Lido itself has around 30% of the voting power, and that's concerning for a proof of stake token, proof of stake layer one, such as ETH2, because if you have that kind of voting power concentrate into like one contract or one entity, they could theoretically, double spend the network.
Yeah. So centralization pressures are always a concern. We see these with, for example, like even the client diversity. There's been it seems to be getting better now, but there's sort of these centralization pressures that emerge, and you kind of actively have to fight against them sometimes. Now, Lido itself, I believe, and I'm not an expert on the protocol, but I believe they're a DAO structure, less sort of centralized control. There's probably multi-sigs in control still at this stage, but gradual decentralization is the overarching thesis for many of these staking protocols, from my understanding. But yeah, absolutely, we need to be very concerned with one protocol or one centralized entity controlling too much of the network. And there's just been years of research done on this to try and minimize the chance that this happens. But I think it's going to be an ongoing effort, and maybe we'll never be fully there, but we just need to keep kind of fighting the good fight of making sure things are decentralized.
Yeah, sure. And it's about user education too, because it was an opt-in thing that many users decided, well, I'm not going to run a node myself. I may as well just delegate my ETH to somebody else who's going to do the work for me. Um, so yeah, it is an issue with uh, contending convenience with decentralization and network security, and that's
Mhm.
that's always been the fight with within any proof of stake protocol too.
Definitely. And with these sort of the individual thought process where you're like, I'm just gonna stake with Lido because it's easy, right? Like I totally get that. I think they have incentives against this, and that is sort of the slashing conditions, where if one person's in too far control of the network and they screw something up across all their nodes, there's going to be big penalties. And I hope one of these doesn't happen, but it may take one or two of these events to kind of say, hey, this is not risk free. Like there are tail risks. There's tail risks all over DeFi that I think people kind of ignore until it really comes up, right? So yeah, I hope it just improves over time.
Yeah. Well, the issue with this with concentrating a voting power on Lido, for example, is let's say they are malicious. It's that with the amount of voting power that they have, I believe because Casper is simulating Nakamoto consensus, therefore the safety threshold is 51%, I believe. So if they have more than that, then they could even submit transactions that they themselves would validate as legitimate, and therefore wouldn't even trigger a slashing condition. I think it steal everything. That's
Right.
that's the issue.
I'm going to say I'm not an expert on
Yeah,
Ethereum to staking. So
yeah. I'm not gonna FUD anyone, but that's just been the thing that's been concerning to me. But
okay.
anyway, not saying that Lido is going to be malicious or anything, but yeah. So hey, at what point would it make sense for Maker, and I'm just asking theoretically, to launch an instance on Evmos, for example, because we have a Web3 compatible chain. It's called Evmos. There's also another one. It's called Chronos, and they basically do the same thing as like any ETH layer two now.
Mhm.
Like at what point would it make sense for Maker to actually come over and deploy an instance?
Yeah, I think we're kind of just prioritizing the biggest networks. So, I mean, if there's a lot of users on it, then we will just, as long as it's EVM compatible, that's a big piece, because then
Yeah.
otherwise we have to like recode everything, and that's just not that feasible. But yeah, we're sort of getting the first instance deployed on these L2s. But once we have that first instance, going wide to all these different chains is not going to be a problem. It becomes a lot easier than building the first one. So yeah, I see absolutely no reason why we can't go to the EVMOS. You say? Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not super
Mhm.
familiar with the Cosmos ecosystem, but yeah, if there's users there, we'll be there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay, so let's touch on Maker's growth strategy before we take questions from the audience, if there are any in the live stream. Yeah, so you guys have I read your tweet. It was a two-step plan outlining collateralizing using real-world assets. Can you talk more about that?
This is which tweet was this? The aggressive growth strategy one?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah. So that was a tweet I put out 2 months ago as sort of a strategy for growing the protocol. The first step involved basically what's called our surplus buffer. You can think of it like our treasury. We currently have that at 75 million. It's it's grown a lot over the past year, but it's still not sufficient for the amount of outstanding debt we have. DAI, it's down now recently to, I think, 6.5 billion in market cap. But previously we reached even 10 billion. And so part of issuing loans is you need to be prepared to take on bad debt when things go wrong. And so having the surplus buffer, the treasury rather, being only 75 million for this amount of outstanding debt is not enough. There are some risks with that. And so we have to be fairly conservative overall with the protocol with an amount that small. So to address this, we have been developing strategies to basically get capital into the treasury via loans and whatnot, so that we can sort of shore up this insurance buffer, such that we can take more risks with the protocol. And when I say risks, it comes with greater reward, right? So doing multi-chain expansion at a with higher debt ceilings on these chains protects, with a larger surplus buffer, it protects us in the bad event where something goes wrong with the bridge and there's a hack or whatever. We'll be able to stay solvent, which is, as always, we are thinking of DAI holders with all of this. We want them to not have to worry about this stuff. It just sort of works. So that was stage one of the growth strategy. Stage two is sort of a multi-pronged approach, and it involves a lot of the stuff we kind of already went over with the D3Ms. That's sort of like wholesale credit delegation to other protocols that specialize in some particular thing, such as Aave. They have sort of an awesome crypto lending market, or like Maple, where they're focused on connecting to traditional lenders. We basically let them do what they do best, and then we extend them a credit line. That's sort of what that is. And the amount we can extend them increases as we increase this sort of insurance buffer. So this will bring new revenues into the protocol, new opportunities. It will grow DAI, and ultimately we can perhaps turn on an implicit savings rate such that we can pass all these new revenues on to DAI holders, and then get sort of a yield out of just holding DAI, which is ideal for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last piece, I guess, would just be real world asset borrowers. We are, in addition to using protocols like Maple, we're directly engaged with some more traditional banks and stuff like that, like SocGen in France. There's some other deals in the works, but yeah, so we're directly engaged, as well as sort of delegating through other protocols.
And what sorts of real world assets are you partnering with?
Yeah, so probably the lowest hanging fruit now that interest rates are rising, treasuries and bonds and stuff like that, they're fairly safe investments, but their yields are starting to go up from 0% last year. US treasuries are looking at about like 2%, I believe, yield by the end of the year or something like that. So by right now, since the crypto lending has sort of cooled off a bit, and this is due to us being in bear market or whatever you want to call this, people just don't want to take leverage, and we can't force them. So we have to sort of supplement that borrowing with something else, and sort of the easiest way to do that is to inject that excess DAI into something like treasuries or corporate bonds or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to zoom out onto the geopolitical macro scale right now, which is how does Maker reconcile with the fact that like China has been like selling its bonds? It just wants to separate itself from U.S. treasuries, because we're seeing a trend, which is these other superpowers are moving away from U.S. dollars as the global reserve currency. So, if you're exposing yourself in as a DeFi protocol back to the old guard, how do you reconcile that, as a DeFi protocol?
Yeah, so we just view these as sort of risks that we factor into like our policies and giving loans and stuff like that. So like ideally, we have a lot of US exposure right now for like political and jurisdictional and stuff like that. But this is not the end state. We are global. DeFi is a global thing, and so we want to expand the portfolio to other countries that can give us sort of like, so we're not just completely reliant on one counterparty or one country or stuff like that. This has, again, been the ethos from the beginning. Rune has outlined this stuff from like 4 years ago or so, sort of saying that, yeah, this is the end state. We want heavily diversified portfolio backing DAI, such that we can sustain tail risk events and even ideally at the country level.
Got it. Okay, that's all the questions that I have. Are there any last comments that you have or would like to add that we didn't address?
Yeah, so like I said, if you're looking to get involved in Maker, the DAO is very active, and I would say just get into the forums, forums.makerdao.com. We're hiring, so please get involved. We want to be sort of the next, the next sort of global world reserve currency, and we want you to help get involved, help building towards that. It's very exciting.
Okay. Thank you so much. We have one question from the audience. GMAD11 asks, Axelar, drop? So there aren't that many specific details to be shared yet, but from what I understand, there's going to be a retroactive airdrop to people who bridge DAI, USDC, and WETH, wrapped ETH, WBTC over from the Axelar bridge to Osmosis within a given window, starting from when the bridge was live to perhaps a month from when it went live. So yeah, and it's going to be dropped pro rata to the amount of net new tokens that you inject into Osmosis. So that's just kind of rewarding more people custodying their assets on the Osmosis chain.
Awesome.
So, yeah, very exciting. The UST blowout was devastating, but also good in certain ways, because UST was actually sort of cornering the stablecoin market in Cosmos, but now it's kind of opened up the floodgates, and other stablecoin projects are seeing this as an opportunity to come in and compete in a more open space. So that's what's
awesome.
happening.
Yeah, glad to have DAI in more places. Love it.
Yeah, very exciting. And it's very exciting to hear what you guys have in the works. So I'll definitely be a DAI user. So GMAD11 asks, Sam is into Hex?
Hex the token, I assume. No, it's a coincidence. I just don't know that much about it, to be honest. I see it a lot on crypto Twitter. Don't have an opinion, really.
Yeah, I've done some preliminary research because I love a good scam, and I love looking into it. Yeah, it's a Richard Hart project, and that guy is so skillful at appearing to sound smart in front of people who are less technical, so they will buy into like the buzzwords and everything. But so from what I understand, Hex is he was selling Hex as like the new Bitcoin / store of value with UTXOs, except it's on proof of stake. And then there was some economic fuckery with how he manipulated the markets, because when he launched those tokens, the speculation is that he had like a significant amount of the tokens himself, and so he was just market making himself and pumping the tokens and up and down. And so people saw that, Hex token went up, I don't know, it was like 100x. This is the next Bitcoin, I'm going to buy into it. And he was talking about how like the merits of Hex being on proof of stake. And anyway, I looked
Is this
into
the
that.
same guy that did? He's doing like Pulse Chain or something now.
Yeah,
Seen this circulating.
I think no. Pulse Chain is Hex. Pulse Chain, the ticker symbol for Pulse Chain is Hex, HEX. So
Okay.
yeah, so I wanted to get Richard Hart on this podcast, just like smash him with the technical questions, but he ignored my DM. So there you go. Richard, if you're listening to this, come on this podcast, and I'm gonna grill you. Okay. Well, anyway, yeah, thank you everyone for listening to Interchain FM. If any of y'all who are listening has a direct connection with Richard Hart, tell him I'm interested in interviewing him. But anyway, yeah, Hex has proven to not. Turns out it's not the new Bitcoin, right? So, yeah, thanks, Brian, for helping me produce these shows. And we're doing pre-recorded shows in the next month because there's just a really busy conference circuit in June. So, yes, I will be at Consensus. So, anybody who's going to be at Consensus, I would love to meet you in person. And yeah, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to be subscribed to this YouTube channel. It's Chango Unchained, so you don't miss out on any of the future alpha. And yeah, if you would like to spread the word, the most important thing that you could do is like this video. If you'd like to support us, we do run an Interchain FM stake validator on Osmosis, UMI, and Comdex. So feel free to delegate to us. We have some whitelist giveaways for a lot of the Cosmos NFT projects coming up. So be sure to delegate to Interchain FM. Your future self will thank you for stacking Osmo, UMI, and Comdex in the future by the time the next bull market comes around. So thank you all.